As the word system suggests, the digestive system has lots of different organs, all contributing with something to the digestive and absorption process of nutrients and other necessary elements in order for us to carry on and survive. In this slide, what we're going to do, or my main point is going to be pointing out the very basic and general things. They have a lot of extra names here like jejunum, ileum, cecum, appendix, and all that stuff. But for our intents and purposes now, we'll go through it, just the basics, just naming the small intestine, large intestine, all that. And then maybe at the end of everything, we'll put everything two and two together. In fact, what I would suggest as we go through this, you make a list of every area, we'll say, of what it does, whether it has mechanical or chemical digestion, and if so, how is it mechanically digest? How does it chemically digest? That type of thing. That way, when you come back and review this, you can say, okay, this part does this part does this, based on this. These enzymes are secreted here, these things are done here and created there, all that goodness. So let's go ahead and just start off where food will enter the body. Obviously, if you have a small child who's going through the nose, not going to happen here, hopefully. But we'll start off right here. We got the mouth, the pharynx. Hopefully you remember from the last chapter about the pulmonary system, the respiratory system, forgive me, that this is a shared pathway for both air and food. But once you get past that pharynx, you get into the esophagus. The esophagus leads to the stomach. The stomach will lead into the small intestine. And the small intestine ends where this large, bumpy tube is, which is your large intestine. Comes around, comes to your rectum, and then finally out the anus. Something to note is that a lot of these words are highlighted in red. Red indicates that these are accessory organs, or organs that we've considered not really part of the digestive system, but does play a role. So for instance, your tongue and teeth are considered accessories. The rest of them, how I remember the rest of these particular accessory organs is that they don't have direct contact with food. Often it's just an indirect contact via ducts or something. For instance, you got your salivary glands here. You got the parotid, submandibular, and the sublingual. We'll get into more of that when we talk about the mouth. We got the liver. Obviously, the liver never sees food or comes direct contact with food, but it connects to the small intestine via a duct. Gallbladder, same thing. Pancreas, same thing. Those are accessory organs. Now, there are 6 particular processes that we're going to be talking about, 6 basic processes. Ingestion, you will want to know the definitions of these. So beginning with ingestion, if we were to break this word together, in means to take in, right? Gest is to gestate, or is to take it, to, again, pull in, push in, or make noise. Not make noise. I don't know why I'm saying that, but it means ingest means to take in food. Secrete is, well, secretion. You're putting stuff out into it. So that those salivary glands, that liver, that pancreas, secrete things out into the digestive tract to help digest things. So this one is indicating a digestive enzyme. That could also be hydrochloric acid, like in the stomach, or saliva, like in the salivary glands. Motility, you know that gurgling noise when you're hungry, or you're what have you, sitting there nice and quietly, and all of a sudden your stomach starts talking to you, and the swoosh swoosh and all that. That's just your digestive tract moving things along, swirling, twirling stuff, and then moving it along. Then we got digestion, which is literally to break into pieces. So you break it down into its simplest form because you can't absorb. Absorb means to pull things into your blood vessels from the digestive system. You can't absorb very large molecules. Very small molecules usually make it in. Maybe monoglycerides, maybe rarely a diglyceride. Amino acids, small, very small chunks, maybe dipeptides, tripeptides, lipids, things like that. And then there's defecation, which is the expelling of whatever waste products you have left over out of the on the other end via the anus. The digestive system has, well, at least the tubing of most of these digestive systems, the large intestine, small intestine, stomach, have a very similar setup to one another. The one that's inner, that's actually touching the food and interacting with the food, is called the mucosa. Mucosa, well, there's usually a bit of mucus involved. The submucosa, remember that sub means below, so this thing is below the mucosa, so we got a submucosa. You'll notice that the submucosa actually has the capillaries, it has the venules and arterioles and all that stuff, as well as you're going to be noticing that it has a nerve plexus. The appropriate name for that plexus, look at that, submucosal plexus. That's really nice that they name the plexus associated with the submucosa as the submucosal plexus. Usually they name it after someone. Oh, there it is. Thanks, Meisner. Then we also have just above, even further down into the basement of the submucosa is the muscularis region. You got in most the small and large intestine. You have two layers of this smooth muscle. But you will also notice that we do have these nice yellow cords going in. Again, that nervous system. This is called the myenteric plexus. My means muscle. Enteric usually refers to your digestive tract or your innards. So does the myenteric is the muscles of your stomach. Has a plexus. And again, there's that guy that's decided to name it after himself, Plexus Orbach. I just slaughtered his name. I apologize to Orbach. And then just above that, you'll see that there is a serosa. That serosa is basically made of connective tissue, trying to keep everything nice and stable. It also kind of comes in via this mesentery. It's like a fold going on. Via this mesentery that comes around, loops around, and then sandwiches back around. And it sandwiches on those venules and veins and arteries and arterioles and all that stuff. And it is indeed coated with this yellowish substance, which you know as fat. Let's dig in a little bit deeper into that nervous system really quick. We do have an enteric nervous system, that submucosal plexus and the myenteric plexus, both of which really help self-govern the digestive system. We got a lot of neurons, a lot of neural cells hanging out inside of this digestive system, almost as much, if not more, than that of your central nervous system, your brain. So it really is a big self-governing thing. The only thing that the brain or the central nervous system has control over is whether it's a parasympathetic or a nervous response, or a sympathetic response, meaning that the rest and digest, parasympathetic just lets the digestive system do what it wants to do, and then there's the sympathetic, the run and the fight or run type of response. Here they are and how they relate with one another. That myenteric, remember, is that muscle plexus, the muscles of the organs. But this one is the nervous system. You'll see that it has some governance over the muscle layers. Surprise, surprise. The myenteric also has an interaction with that submucosal plexus. We'll also notice in that submucosal plexus we have the neural body here, which will interact, depending on what the autonomic nervous system, the central nervous system wants to understand and do with, it can send back a signal about rest and digest, keep on doing your thing, or fight or flight. We're all aware that this region here is called the abdominal pelvic region. Remember, because it includes the stuff inside the pelvis as well as the abdomen. But we're going to go ahead and further subdivide this even further. We're going to relate it to that of the organs inside this cavity. We have a peritoneum, and a retroperitoneum. Peritoneum, and how do you distinguish between the peritoneum and retroperitoneum? Retro means behind, right? Or in the back, or in the past. So everything lining the backside, or I'll explain a little bit better in greater detail here shortly, but usually everything that lies behind this peritoneal layer of epithelial cells is considered in the retroperitoneal cavity, while everything that's inside or dangling on the inside of it is considered in the peritoneal cavity. So again, let's break that word down, these things down really quick. So here's this little blue line going all the way around. It's encasing certain things. It's encased the stomach. It's encased bits and pieces of the small intestine, large intestine, all that stuff. But you're going to notice that some of these don't really have a direct, like dangling type of thing going on here, like the small intestines do, like the stomach does. The liver, you can see, has access, well, isn't completely covered by it. Nor is this thing right here, the pancreas or the duodenum. These three in this upper portion are in the retroperitoneal cavity, and yes, you do need to know that. So we got the duodenum, by the way, is the very first portion of the small intestine. We got the liver, that's part of the retroperitoneal cavity, the pancreas, which is part of the retroperitoneal cavity. Your duodenum, again, that first portion of the small intestine is part of the retroperitoneal cavity. You got the sigmoid colon, which is the latter end of the large intestine. It's just past the descending colon, as well as your rectum. The uterus in females is part of the retroperitoneal cavity, and the bladder in both sexes is in the retroperitoneal cavity. A couple of other things to point out in this slide really quick is to note this and this. You may have noticed that there's a lesser omentum and a greater omentum that's sort of helping support and establish things. It's there for several reasons. That lesser omentum, which is at the portion that binds together, there it is right there. Lesser omentum has a connection between the stomach and the liver. It helps stabilize that stomach in its place. You don't want that stomach churning every which way. And that's sort of what the mesentery does, but we'll get into the mesentery here shortly. What happens afterwards is that this large curve of the stomach also has the greater omentum attached to it, even though this picture isn't doing its justice. You can see it here, that greater omentum connected to that stomach. It is also connected to that portion of the colon. But what it does, it has several things that it does. It's a fat deposit. It's not a huge fat deposit. It does get wider, but most of the fat deposit is in other parts. If you're male, you're talking about the fat inside your hypodermis, around your gut, your belly. If you're female, that's also distributed in around hips and a little bit more upper. Other things that it does is that it's an immunological response, meaning that there's a lot of white blood cells that can deal and handle with infections here, as well as something that I learned recently is that it can, if there's a cut or a boo-boo or an ulcer, and there's an opening, this greater omentum tends to try and find that spot and seal it off, which is in some cases, if we're out in the natural world, we're cavemen, no medical technology whatsoever, that's going to be a-okay. But if we're in the modern world now, we don't really want that greater omentum there. That could cause some serious damage and make things a lot more difficult to be able to repair things. So that greater omentum has that threefold role. Really neat stuff. I did say that we should visit the mesentery again. Remember that mesentery is there's that layer of peritoneum that comes around and rolls around that large intestine and comes back. That mesentery also is like that life support, as well as keeping those intestines in their place, because, well, these guys are pretty mobile. They like to squib and squirrel and sploosh and splosh and move stuff around. And, well, You don't really want yourself being tied in knots, so that mesentery is there to help out. You also don't want it folding in on itself, or else it's a really, really painful experience. Those intestines and collapsing in on one another. Finally, let's talk one last bit of detail, chemical versus mechanical digestion. You will want to know the difference between the two, as well as I mentioned earlier, that mechanical digestion is really important to know what parts of the digestive system do it, as well as that chemical digestion, how each body part or each organ or portion of the digestive system creates and produces chemicals. So some examples of mechanical digestion would be your teeth, which obviously you're chewing or masticating. That's a fancy word that you do need to know eventually. Your tongue, which can manipulate food and put it onto your teeth and swirl it around, as well as when we get down into your intestines, your stomach, you got the churning and mixing. It helps if you got chemicals, you got to get those chemicals mixed in really well, or you're not going to be able to digest and absorb as much as you can actually do. Chemical digestion would be, for instance, hydrochloric acid, your saliva, mucus in the large intestine, small intestine. You got bile from your liver, made from your liver, enzymes. And what enzymes are, I need to really point out really quick because it's actually really important for you. It's very helpful for you to know these little tips and tricks really quick. Enzymes are indeed proteins, and most end with an ACE, A-S-E at the end of it, and begin with a portion of the word with which they break down. So for instance, if this one is saying it breaks down protein, protease. This one breaks down lipids, it's a lipase. While this one breaks down DNA, it's DNase. Hopefully that makes all sense to you. Thank you for your time, and remember, you got this.